see us at some point. We are open to the public right now, but we do ask that you make a reservation, and we have all of the COVID-19 protocol in place to keep everybody safe as well. So can everybody see my screen share okay? It says something like your screen sharing is paused. Can you see that okay, Joy and Barb? Good, okay, and you see the Welcome to the City of Sunshine screen? Excellent, okay. So today we are talking about one of my most favorite parts of local history, which is the City of Sunshine. And we have a special exhibit in the museum called the City of Sunshine exhibit. And this is a picture of it here. Again, if you have a chance to come in and visit and take a look, I hope that you will someday, because it's really neat to see it in person. So today for our program, we're going to explore this idea of the City of Sunshine. And I want to ask before we get started, and let's go ahead and share in the chat function, since there's a few of us here that might make it easier. Can you share with me why you might think we were called or have been called the City of Sunshine, Colorado Springs? Let me see if I can figure out how to see. So yeah, in the chat function, you can just share why you think we might have been called the City of Sunshine. What do you think? We get lots of sun, absolutely. They say that we're known for getting over 300 days of sunshine in a year. I know when I was a kiddo, I was always so sad that it rarely snowed on Christmas. We always had such beautiful sunny Christmases. Absolutely. So yeah, that is a wonderful description of why we are called the City of Sunshine, because we get so much sun. But there's another really important reason that we are going to explore now. So for some reason, I'm having trouble seeing my PowerPoint and the chat function. I do not know why.
I can read you things in the chat if that's
that
helpful.
would be great. Yeah, okay. I don't know why it won't let me see both. So our goal today is to dive really deep into this idea of why we were called the City of Sunshine, not just the actual sun, but because of something called tuberculosis. So we're going to try and figure out together, what is tuberculosis? We're going to talk about how was tuberculosis treated before fancy medicine, something called antibiotics that we have today. Why did people come to Colorado Springs for treatment for tuberculosis? And then I think one of the most interesting questions we can ask today is, how does the experience with tuberculosis differ, or is it similar to our experience today with COVID-19? So we can learn a lot from the past and can relate to the past in a lot of different ways. I think one of the best ways to learn about the past is to really experience it. So I have a little bit of a challenge for you all today. You were told in advance to have a couple things ready. And if for some reason you don't have these things ready, no big deal. We can pretend. But we are going to do something called regimented care. And regimented is just a really fancy word for organized, meaning that the patients, the people who experienced tuberculosis, which was a disease, I'll give you one little hint, every minute of their day was organized. They had someone constantly interrupting them and saying, oh, it's time to take your temperature, it's time to take your pulse, it's time to eat. And this was one of the ways they felt they could help people feel better from tuberculosis. So I want you to get an idea of what that experience might be like. So to get us all started, if you have a piece of paper and a marker or a pencil or a pen, this is how you can keep track. And we'll kind of call this the patient log. And this is how you'll keep track of your experience today. And you'll see on my log, I just put my name, and then I wrote down a couple notes. I have temperature, meals, pulse, which are all things that we're going to keep track of today. So just make sure you've got something to keep notes about today. Throughout today's presentation, we are going to unfortunately get interrupted, and we're going to be told to do different things. We might be told to eat a meal. So if you have a snack or something that you could nibble on for that, that would be perfect. We're going to be told to drink some milk. If you don't have milk, that's fine. I've just got a nice glass of water here. We're going to be told to take our pulse, which I'm going to show you how to do that during that part. But there's a picture here that kind of demonstrates what that looks like. And then we're also going to be told to take our temperature. So we can use a thermometer, or again, we can just hold our hands up to our head and get a general idea of what our temperature is. So this is all in good fun. No need to worry too much if you don't have this supplies. It's just a way for us to kind of experience what this was like for people in the past. Okay? So as I told you throughout the presentation, we're going to get some interruptions as we go along. And this is just a really quick picture. This gives you an idea of what it was like to be a TB patient. So you were interrupted all day long from 6 in the morning to 9 p.m. at night. You had a nurse coming in to feed you, to take your temperature, to take your pulse, to make you do certain activities. So we're going to come back to this image a little bit later, but this is why we've got to pay attention to the regimented care and this organized care that we'll go through today. So you are all going to get the experience today of what it was like to be a tuberculosis patient. And this would have been in the late 1800s all the way up until the 1940s. So their lives were very organized and very controlled. This is what their homes would have looked like. Each person would have lived in one of these tiny little huts. They're called TB huts, and they were made out of canvas or wood. And there were a lot of rules when they checked into one of these hospitals. They were called sanatoriums. There were certain supplies they had to pack. They had to, oh, did you have a question, Barb?
We cannot see the picture of the house. It's stuck on the first slide, at least mine is. Is anyone else having that trouble?
So it says your screen sharing is paused, and I don't know. Let's see here.
If you press the refresh button, perhaps.
I am so sorry, guys. Let's see if we can figure this out. One minute here. My PowerPoint, of course, closed on me at just the perfect time. Okay, so let's try this again. Screen share, PowerPoint, share. Okay. Can we see, what can we see now?
The start photo, but we also see the entire presentation on the left-hand side. So we have to start.
There you go.
There we go.
Okay, excellent, fabulous. I know, I was wondering why it said it was paused. Okay, fabulous. So as I was saying, there were a lot of rules when you were a tuberculosis patient. So you would check yourself into these hospitals. They were called sanatoriums. And they would give you all sorts of rules. They'd say, oh, you've got to pack all this stuff. You've got to have a hot water bag. You have to have a thermometer, a laundry bag. They say if anyone does something that we're not happy with, we have the right to dismiss you. So this was a really serious thing. If you were going to check into one of these, you were really giving into the rules and the requirements they had. It also was super duper expensive. So they say that you might need up to 2 years' salary. So think of your mom and dad. They work so hard. They work for an entire year. Multiply that money they make times 2. That's what you would need just to do something called chasing the cure. So to actually work towards feeling better from tuberculosis. So lots of rules and lots of money was needed. This is just kind of a fun little fact. So I told you that they lived in these little houses. Here's a couple houses that you can spot around town. Next time you visit Manitou Springs, look for this little set of 2 TB huts. Rockledge Ranch, when you go to their entrance to pay to enter, they also have a tuberculosis hut at the entrance. So see if you can spot these around town. Oh, I am so sorry. This is our first interruption. So again, as a patient, I'm here to remind you that you need to take your first meal of the day. So everybody take a bite of whatever your meal, or sip, sorry, we're doing our first sip of the day. So take a drink of your milk or whatever you have on you. And then on your patient log, you just want to mark that you took your first milk of the day. And again, this is really important because we want to keep track of your health throughout today's program and see if you start to feel better at the end. And all of these things will help us keep track. So did everybody take your first sip? Fabulous. Okay. Sorry for that interruption. Okay, so let's really dive into what is tuberculosis. We know that TB is a disease. I mentioned that. We compared it to COVID-19, so you probably knew it was something that made people feel sick. but I want us to use our history detective skills today to see what we can figure out together. So throughout today's program, I'm going to show you photographs, and your job is to help me figure out what stories the photographs tell. So for this first photo, if you could, again, in the chat function, share with me what is going on here. What do you see in this photo? Oh, and I can pull up the chat, which is great now. So, okay, so we say X-ray. What else? What other observations? Can you describe the man? What's going on with this gentleman here? He's getting an X-ray, is what Jacob said. Does he look happy? Does he look okay? Oh, an X-ray of his lungs. Excellent, very specific. I love it. Can you describe the actual person? How would you describe him? He looks scared. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacob, for sharing these things. So photographs are a great way for us to learn about the past. So you are absolutely correct. This is a man, and he does have tuberculosis, who is getting an X-ray of his lungs. And absolutely, he looks scared. He also, if you notice, looks really, really thin. This was one of the main symptoms of tuberculosis, is people would lose a lot of weight. They weren't very hungry. They didn't have much of an appetite. So the goal was to put a lot of that weight back on them, which is why we're having you eat all this food today, because we want to try and help you as tuberculosis patients. So absolutely, tuberculosis, it's called pulmonary tuberculosis, that took place in the lungs. And this X-ray would help them see that tuberculosis in their lungs. It would also help them track and see if the person was feeling better, if they got better over time. So this photo gives us a lot of hints. A couple other symptoms or signs of tuberculosis, it could be like a really bad cold. So people would have a cough, they'd be really tired, loss of appetite, and overall they just felt pretty cruddy. And it could last a really long time. Now, back then, we didn't have all the medications we have today. Today, of course, we know with COVID-19, we have a special vaccination that's helping people feel better or protect them from the COVID-19. Back then, they didn't have that for tuberculosis just yet. So that's an important part of our story. Okay. Kind of a fun fact about tuberculosis, it's actually an ancient disease. So they have found evidence in Egyptian mummies dating all the way back to ancient Egypt that they had tuberculosis even back then. So kind of a fun fact there. This is what tuberculosis looks like. So it's not something we can just see. Just like we can't see COVID-19 or the cold or a flu, we have to put the bacteria underneath a microscope and get really, really close to it so we can see it magnified. And this is what it looks like. And a lot of people tell me it looks like French fries or hot Cheetos. I think they're probably just a little hungry when they see this slide here. But it's kind of interesting to think about. One person told me that the word tuberculosis is interesting because it has tube in it. And these little kind of Cheeto guys look like tubes in some ways. So kind of an interesting way to remember the shape of the tuberculosis. Oh, I am so sorry for the interruption. So now it is time for your first meal. So if you've got your snack with you, go ahead and take your first meal of the day. And again, it's very important that you log on your chart your meal so we know. If you remember the gentleman in that photo, one of the symptoms was extreme weight loss. People weren't very hungry. They couldn't keep weight on their body. So as TB patients, it's really important that we keep you fed. So take that first meal. Okay. So another question for you all, what is this? This is actually an artifact, which I define artifacts as objects that tell stories. What is this object? Does anyone want to share in the chat function what they think this special object is? And you can look for clues on the top of it here. What do you see? Share in the chat function for me. See if my chat's working now. Any ideas? And there's no bad ideas. That's what's kind of fun about being a history detective, is you just got to share your ideas and then you can work together to figure it out.
Can you see the chat, Meg? Or did you lose it again?
I might have lost it. Let's see
have
here.
One person.
Chat. I can't see it. Yeah,
Okay.
Share with me what they said.
Okay, so from Jacob, it says Sputum Cup. Good, right? If I'm saying that right.
Fabulous.
And the Troop 920 group says Spit Holder.
Excellent. Nice. Just getting straight to the point there. I love it. Fabulous. So you guys are absolutely right. Sputum is just a kind of a crazy word for spit, essentially. You know, when you have a really bad cold and you've kind of got that gunk in your chest. My mom always called it gunk, and you have to clear your throat and you kind of want it out of your system. That's that sputum. Tuberculosis patients, because they were having issues with their lungs, would often have to spit a lot. And guess what? In the year 1909, they made it illegal to spit on the ground. They said, we can't just have all these people with tuberculosis spitting everywhere, because they were afraid it would spread. It was a very contagious disease. So cups like this sputum cup, fabulous job, was something that you could spit into throughout the day. And then inside of it, there's this little paper insert, and you would burn it at the end of the day. So you would take that paper out, burn it, put a new paper cup in. This was a public version. This is called a spittoon. So this would be in public places like a courthouse or a school. If you didn't have that personal sputum cup, this would be a place where you could spit. So I didn't promise you this wasn't going to be a gross program. It's a little icky to think about, but also really helps us think about the history of diseases and health and wellness and how we treated them in the past. So excellent observations. Oh, I am so sorry. It is time for an interruption. I need everybody to take their temperatures. So again, if you have a thermometer, feel free to pop that in your mouth. If not, just hold your hand up to your head and see if you can get an idea of how you're feeling. Okay. Looks like everybody's doing pretty good. So go ahead and you can mark down your temperature that you had on your little log here and keep track of that. Again, this was really important for tuberculosis patients to make sure they weren't running a fever. Just like COVID-19, we like to keep track of, do you have a fever? Are you feeling okay? Fevers can tell us a lot. So that's why they would take their temperature throughout their treatment. Okay, so everybody do me a favor and take a deep breath in right now. Just a big old deep breath in. That feels good. It's always nice to take a deep breath. So your lungs are probably looking pretty good. We're all feeling pretty good. Although I'm just getting over a cold, so maybe my lungs are a little not too clear right now. But for the most part, this is an x-ray that shows you what normal, healthy lungs look like. These lungs here on the right, do you remember the man in the photo at the beginning? This is probably what his x-ray would look like. So we're going to do a little bit of comparing here. I'd love for you in the chat function, and please Joy or Barb share with me what they write, to tell me, what do you notice on the lung showing the tuberculosis? What do you observe when you look at that x-ray? And the arrows are a really good help to point out what's going on there. I always feel like doing the Jeopardy song during this part.
Okay, we have Caden saying a hole with a question mark. And Jacob, they have holes in the lung, it looks like.
Excellent observations. Fabulous. So, you know, when we go to the dentist and we're told that we have a cavity, that is never fun to hear. That's what these are called. So they're essentially little cavities or holes inside the lung. And they're just little kind of interruptions in the lung that can make it really difficult for people to breathe. So this is another part of the tuberculosis symptoms, is difficulty breathing. There's also a lot of what they call scar tissue. So people who have tuberculosis in their lungs will always have that scar tissue. Even if they're cured of the TB, that scar tissue is always going to be present. So that's a couple different things that is shown here, but certainly those cavities would make it very uncomfortable in your lungs. Oh, time for a meal break. Everybody go ahead and take a bite of your snack or whatever you have with you. And make sure that you log that on your meal chart. We want to make sure that you're keeping a lot of food in you throughout your treatment here at the Colorado Springs Pioneers Museum Sanatorium. Excellent job. Okay. So now that we kind of have an idea of what tuberculosis is, right? We've used some clues from the past to understand what tuberculosis is. Now the big question we want to answer is, how was it treated before present day medications. How was it treated in the late 1800s and the early 1900s? Like I said, today we have a lot of great medications and treatments we can use, but back then we didn't. So we're going to look at some clues to help us figure that out. So what's going on in this photo? Share in the chat function any observations you have. You'll notice here the little huts that I mentioned earlier. There's a bunch of the little huts, but what's going on in the photo?
Okay, it looks like Jacob is saying they have holes. Oh, no, hospital.
It's a hospital. Great. So this is one of those hospitals. You were thinking about the other question, huh, with the holes. Yep. So this is a sanatorium, which is a hospital for TB patients. What else? Do you notice what's going on? There's a few people out. What are these people doing? Any other ideas? We've got the main hospital here, and each of these huts, one person would have lived in these.
Looks like there used to be an overland.
Overland.
I'm not sure if I know what that means.
I don't know that I do either.
Getting sun. They get sunlight and air.
Excellent. Yeah, so let's focus on this idea of fresh air, okay? So this was the number one thing needed for tuberculosis treatment before antibiotics. They called it the fresh air cure. So look, they're out here in the beautiful mountains surrounded by these wonderful trees. The sun is shining and they're out getting some fresh air. This was one thing they really encouraged tuberculosis patients to get as much of as possible. One thing that someone brought up to me at one point is if people are living on the East Coast, so maybe they're living in Philadelphia in a big city, it's a little bit harder to get fresh air, right? There's a lot of industrialization, which means there's a lot of buildings and there's smog and smoke and you live in tight quarters. Coming to a place like Colorado Springs that wasn't quite as developed, we were a newer city, right? And we were really spread out. People could access fresh air a lot easier. So absolutely, so people getting fresh air in this photo. What are these folks doing in this image? There's a lot of interesting things going on here.
Okay, just to clarify from before, huts, there were a lot of huts on the land.
Oh, excellent job. Yes,
so
lots
many and lots of huts. And then other people were saying people recovering. We had a literary reference to Maze Runner of how that looks. And as far as these people, looks like sitting is one of the comments.
Excellent. Recovering, sitting. They're not doing much of anything, right? They're sitting and relaxing. So both of these photos are from the same sanatorium I should mention. It's called the Modern Woodmen of America Sanatorium. So next time you're with your folks and you're driving on the interstate and you pass that Woodman exit, kind of up in the mountains, that's where this sanatorium would be, just about there. And this one was only for men who paid into this insurance company called the Modern Woodmen of America. So that's why in this photo, we only see men pictured. There were sanatoriums that took women as well, but this one only took men. So you're getting lots of fresh air. In this photo, you're getting lots of rest. It was also called the rest cure. So you're expected, in addition to sleeping all night long, you're expected to get up to 8 hours of rest throughout the day. So they would set you up in a chair like this, get you outside to have some fresh air, and you are doing nothing. You're not going for a hike. You're not playing baseball. You are resting because they want you to recover from the tuberculosis. And they thought this would do the trick. Also, what is on the ground here? Doesn't look like a great day to be sitting outside. The ground and the side of the hut. Any guesses?
Jacob says, snow.
Snow. It didn't matter what kind of day it was. If it was snowy, cold, sunshiny, it didn't matter. They wanted you to be outside. So remember I showed you that there were special rules. You also got a special packing list and you were told to bring a bunch of warm wool blankets because you were going to be outside no matter what, to take in that fresh air for sure. Oh, it is time to add to your patient log. So we're going to take our pulse now, which is also really important for our health. And I'm going to keep track of our pulse here. Let's see. And what you're going to do is try and find your pulse. You can either take these 2 fingers and put them on your neck right here and see if you can kind of feel that heartbeat. And if you can't feel it there, just like in the picture, you can also on your wrist here, put your 2 fingers there and see if you can feel it there. And if you can't pick it up, no big deal. Some days I just can't find it. It's kind of funny. You can try it another time. But what I'm going to do is we're going to count. When I say go, you're going to start counting. And then when I say stop, remember that number because we're going to use that number for our log. Okay. So ready, set, go. Almost there. And stop. Okay, so whatever number you counted, I want you to multiply that times 2. And that is what you're going to record for your pulse on your log. So everybody get that little bit of math in and record that on your log. Excellent job. Okay, so we know that they're resting. We know that they are outside getting fresh air, even on a cold, wintry day. These folks are doing both of those things, but there's something else that's happening in this photo that's really important. I love the mountains in the background. This was a photo that was taken a bit later, so you can tell this is not quite as old as some of the others. But what do you observe here? What is really important about this photo?
Sun tanning, sunbathing,
Yes.
getting rest.
Excellent, excellent observations. I love your history detective skills, guys. So they are sunbathing. A fancy word for this is called heliotherapy. So it's sun therapy. There was a strong belief that the sunshine could cure tuberculosis. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this. My mom would always say, if you want to get something really clean, you want to kill all the germs, set it out in the sunshine and that'll kill the germs. And that's absolutely true. We know that UV light can really help sanitize things. But there was this belief that, maybe that sun could get inside of us and sanitize the inside, kill off all that tuberculosis inside of us. We know today that probably wasn't necessarily true, but overall they saw that people were feeling kind of better in the sunshine. There's a lot of reasons for this. Vitamin D is really important, right? You can imagine these people were probably sad. They were probably really upset because they were struggling with this tuberculosis. And we know vitamin D can help improve your mood and give you some joy. So there's a lot of things about the sunshine that are really positive, but probably not quite as great at curing people from tuberculosis as they thought in the past. But one thing you have to think about is every year, every moment, we're learning new things. So long ago, there was so much information they didn't have, and we've learned a lot of new things today. So this is a great example of something that probably didn't do a great thing for tuberculosis, but there was a strong belief that it would. But once again, they're getting lots of rest, lots of fresh air, and heliotherapy. Okay, so you probably are wondering, what did they eat? Right? I've been having you have all these little meals. What in the world did those meals consist of? When I am sick, I like to have chicken noodle soup. That is my favorite thing. What about you guys? When you are sick, when you're home and you're sick, what's something that you like to enjoy at home?
Okay. Pizza. That came somebody typed pizza very fast, Jacob.
Fabulous. Yes, pizza is
agreement on pizza.
I thought we'd get more chicken noodle soups.
And maybe while they're typing, there was a question before, and I don't know if you want to save it to the end. Didn't Annie Sullivan, Helen Keller's teacher, have TB?
Oh, I actually don't know. Barbara Joy, do you know if she did?
I don't know. I can look into that while you're chatting.
Yeah, let us know. Do a little research for us.
We also have good food. Brat diet, which I guess is banana rice.
Oh, yeah. A really mild.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Cake?
Man, I'm going over to your house, whoever that is that's having pizza and cake when they're sick. Excellent. So we have this idea of what you would eat when you're sick, and some of what you shared is surprising to me. But tuberculosis patients, especially during this era, during this time period, had a pretty standard diet. It consisted of raw eggs, not delicious scrambled eggs with salt and pepper and cheese, raw eggs straight out of the shell, rare beef, which means the beef was cooked just a little bit, so it was mostly a red beef, rye bread, which was a really dense, like dark brown bread, and then milk. And they would drink up to a gallon of milk a day. Like that is a lot of milk in one day. So all of these foods, what do you notice? Why do you think this was the diet? And I need to preface here that this is what they ate every single day. This wasn't what they'd have for a couple months. They could have this for up to 2 years or as long as they're in treatment, right? Maybe they go to treatment for a few months, maybe they're there for years, depending on what they need for their health. So why do you guys think this is what they were eating? Any guesses? Would any of you like to eat this every day?
I would be sick as a dog, Katie says.
It'd make you more sick.
No, from Kennedy. This can kill you. Nope.
No way.
Wise words.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I wouldn't be happy about this either. So the goal, if we go back to that first picture of that man who was so thin, the goal was to put weight back on, right? So there's carbohydrates and there's a lot of protein here, which is the goal. I'm still trying to understand like the raw eggs and the rare beef. I think that has there is something about when you cook things, they lose some of their nutrients, but kind of strange, right? But the idea was to put weight back onto people's bodies. So this was the diet that they would eat. No fruits or vegetables. I thought that was kind of strange too. They're really just trying to put that weight back on their body. So I showed you this picture at the beginning. And again, this is sort of the average day. You're drinking milk, you're getting your temperature taken, you're having your eggs, your beef, your rye bread, having your, time in the sun, you're resting. So this just gives you an idea of how controlled their lives were. It wasn't, oh, today I'm going to play video games and go for a hike and play with my puppy. It's no, here's your day every single day. But honestly, if you were really sick, you would be fine with this. I'm guessing because you just wanted to do whatever it took to feel better. I bet it wasn't that much fun though. So I really feel for these patients and what they had to go through. Oh, speaking of regimented care, go ahead and take your next meal. In this case, it would be rye bread. I don't know if anyone's ever had rye bread. I think it's pretty yummy. It's got a nice texture to it. It's like really dense. It's like a darker bread. So go ahead and munch on your next meal. Excellent job. So here's our final question. And this is so important to think about. When you're studying local history, tuberculosis is a huge part of our history. One, it brought thousands of people here. People came here chasing the cure. They were looking for a cure for tuberculosis. And guess what? Their family came with them, doctors came, and a lot of them stuck around. They built lives here. There's a lot of fabulous people that came here because of tuberculosis. Artist Van Briggle was this fabulous potter, he and his wife Anne, and he only came here because he had tuberculosis. And we can tell his story and really celebrate his art here in Colorado Springs because he lived here and he did his work here. So there's a lot of great stories of people that never would have come to Colorado Springs had it not have been for their health. It also shaped our economy. And by economy, that's the businesses, the people that brought money into this region. It helped us grow and it helped turn us into the community that we are today. So it's such an important part of our history. But here's the big question is why were people coming to Colorado Springs? What about this city do you all think, and I want to hear your ideas, attracted health seekers? Go ahead and share in the chat function what you think.
We have Jacob saying sunny, no air pollution, and lots of space.
Excellent. Love it. Using those history detective skills from all the photos we saw.
Some agreement. Clean air is another comment.
Spread out. Fabulous. Excellent. So those are exactly the reasons why people came here, and we marketed ourselves as the city of sunshine. So people far away living out on the East Coast, they would see advertisements in magazines and newspapers saying, go to Colorado Springs, go west and chase the cure. They would talk about how we have this clean air and we're a great place to recover from tuberculosis. So that's how we sold ourselves. We also know, and this is really fascinating to me, that some people, not everybody, but some people felt better in Colorado Springs. And here's the reason: this tall, tall mountain, we are at high altitude. How many of you, maybe you moved here or you've had relatives or friends visit you and they get off the plane and they just can't catch their breath? They're like, you just can't breathe here. It's so hard to breathe here. Higher altitudes have lower levels of oxygen. So if you were born and raised in Colorado Springs, or if you've lived here for a while, you are superhuman. You have superhuman lungs because you've adapted to live here in Colorado Springs. So here is the cool connection. They have done studies and they know that tuberculosis, in order to grow, to thrive, to spread, and to cause more damage, it needs oxygen. So if you take away some of its oxygen, when people moved here to the higher altitude, that tuberculosis couldn't do quite as much damage. So they believe that's part of the reason people do better at higher altitudes. That being said, some people didn't do better here. It just really depends on the individual. Illnesses are really tricky, but we do know that for some people, that higher altitude made a difference. The other thing is tuberculosis needs moisture. And we are not a place that has a lot of moisture, right? We're a really dry, arid climate is what they call it. So without a lot of oxygen, without a lot of moisture, that tuberculosis just couldn't do as much damage as it could in other parts of the country. So there's a lot of interesting studies. It depends on the individual, like I said. They even have started to do some new studies today where they're looking at the role of vitamin D in promoting healthier lungs. So even in the past, if they didn't quite understand why they were doing the things they did, today we're learning that maybe there was a science to it, and we're understanding that a little bit better. So just some fun facts there. I told you that we promoted ourselves as a place to come and seek health. These are some of the visuals, some of the types of things that you would see in magazines and such. So here's the Pikes Peak region winning health, and we would show them our beautiful mountains and Garden of the Gods and encourage people to come out to this region. Oh, go ahead and take your temperature. This is your final temperature. I'm so sorry for the interruption. Let's make sure, let's see everybody's doing okay. Okay, excellent job. I know some of you've got those really fast ear thermometers. Excellent. Okay, so get that written down. Fabulous. Apologize for the interruption there. So I wanted to, and I thought this was kind of cool. You all have probably seen posters like this, right? That tell, what you should do, precautions to protect yourself from tuberculosis or from COVID-19. I apologize. Just like today, we gave people advice and helped people make sure they were taking care of themselves. There were similar posters and signage that they would use to keep people safe from tuberculosis. This one's a little silly because obviously flies are not that big, but the idea is that you want to keep clean, right? So you want to keep your house clean. You want to keep the flies out of your house. You don't want to spread the tuberculosis disease. So today we've learned a lot more. We know a lot more about hand washing, social distancing. Back then, their idea was, we're still trying to figure this out, but we know if you keep your house clean, you don't attract flies. There's something to that and can help your family. So I wanted to show you that because I thought it was kind of fun. But what I wanted to ask, just to kind of wrap up today's program, and of course, if you have any questions, please ask those as well. But do you all see any similarities or differences between our approach to tuberculosis and our approach to COVID-19? Is there anything that you can relate the two, or are there big differences between the two? And I will say, tuberculosis was a bacteria, is a bacillus or a bacteria, whereas COVID-19 is a virus. So that's one big difference. So please, Joy, if they have questions or comments or anything.
Nothing so far.
And I should mention, tuberculosis is still around today. It's an ancient disease, right? All the way back to Egyptians, and it's still here to ancient Egyptians. It's still here today. Fortunately, we have antibiotics and things to combat tuberculosis, but it's still a challenging disease because it changes, just like we're learning COVID-19 changes. So it's a tricky disease, but we're doing our best to keep it under control.
There is one comment that says one is like a tube and the other is round.
Excellent. So they look different. Absolutely, that bacteria versus that virus. Did you guys see some connections between how we, sort of, if you saw in that picture, each person has their own TB hut. So they're isolated, right? Isolation. Is that similar to COVID-19? If you are exposed or if you have COVID-19, you have to be isolated in your home. That's another connection I see between the two. And the goal is, again, to not spread it. I thought that was pretty interesting. Awesome. Okay, well, that is all I have for you all today. I hope I gave you a little bit of information. Again, my big goal is you study local history. You cannot not consider tuberculosis. It's such an important part of our story. And I was hoping just to give you a little bit of background. And I am really excited about how you used your history detective skills to kind of learn a little bit more about tuberculosis. So a lot of fun. And thank you to Joy and Barb for having me today. I had a great time.
Thanks so much. We did have one more question in the chat.
Great.
And I think, maybe at this point, if people want to ask their own questions, they could certainly unmute and ask. But we had someone asking if animals can get TB.
Oh, wow. That is a really good question. I'm going to look that up real quick because I do not know. Because that was a big question with COVID-19 too, right? Tuberculosis. I know that they can transfer tuberculosis. Let's see here. Cows and many other animals can harbor what they call bovine tuberculosis, a disease caused by the microbacterium. So it's a close relative to the human tuberculosis, and it's a way that it can be transferred to humans. So it's kind of interesting. You know how I told you they drink a lot of milk? That was a huge part of it. They drank the milk before they did something called pasteurization historically, which is like cleaning of any germs or anything. So they actually could transfer tuberculosis through the milk if the cows had this bovine version of TB. So again, there's so much we've learned over time and a lot we didn't know in the past. So now we pasteurize, we clean our milk so we don't pass on diseases like tuberculosis. Oh, chickens can get COVID. I didn't know that. Yeah, so I know at least the bovine version of it is what I saw online.
Kaden mentioned that their family had healing huts on their property.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, so in the 1940s into the 1950s, they discovered this antibiotic, as I mentioned to you all before. Once they discovered that, all these hospitals didn't know what to do with all their little huts, right? They had all these huts. So a lot of these huts were sold in an auction and ended up all over the city of Colorado Springs. So some people have them in their backyards and they use them as sheds or playhouses. They've ended up in downtown Manitou, and you could go there and buy a smoothie. We have the one in our collection at the museum. So it's really fun. Now that you know what they look like, you can spot them all throughout the city. So thank you so much for sharing. That's pretty cool. That's awesome. Excellent. Okay.
My 2-second Google search revealed that Annie Sullivan's mother died of tuberculosis.
Oh, good to know.
So her mother, I think when she was quite young, her mother died from the disease.
Yeah, and it was a hugely impactful disease. I know I talked about that late 1800s up until like the 1940s. 1 in 3 people in Colorado had tuberculosis. So this was a really serious disease, and it was really hard. They didn't have medication to get it under control, but that's why they had to do all these creative things to try and make people feel better. So I'm not surprised. As you look in history, you'll probably see that there's a lot of really important, influential people that had tuberculosis, and some people were cured of it. Some people lived really long lives with TB. So kind of interesting. we live where they used to have the hospitals. Oh, that's cool, Kaden. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of connections. And there a lot of the health, like the hospitals and even like UCCS where they train doctors and nurses, that used to be a sanatorium, Cragmore Sanatorium, Penrose Hospital, St. Francis used to be a sanatorium, Memorial had sanatoriums around there. So they were all over our city for sure.
Fantastic. Any other questions? All right.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Okay. Thanks so much. That was really interesting and informative. Did you want to say anything about the museum and coming by, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I really hope that you all will come and visit us at the Colorado Springs Pioneers Museum. I did want to mention to our kiddos, and if any families are listening as well, this year is Colorado Springs' 150th birthday. So we turned 150 years old in 2021. So the whole city is celebrating this year, and there's a lot of really exciting ways for you all to get involved. Everything from planting a tree, it's part of the tree planting challenge, to a big citywide festival that they're going to put on July 31st. So would it be okay if I linked the education resource guide, Joy and Barb? Is that okay? Let me see if I can pull that up really quick, because I'd love for our parents to see this. So what we did is we put together a guide with all sorts of ways that you can get involved. There are coloring sheets you can download. There's suggestions to celebrate. There's websites you can visit. So I put that in the chat function, and I hope that you'll check that out and see some neat ways you can help us celebrate our 150th birthday. So yeah.
And I can actually follow up with an email with that link if that's easier for people. I'll just shoot it out to the whole registration link. Just sometimes it's hard to get things out of chat.
Yeah.
So I will definitely do that. And thank you so much. That was a great presentation and really, really interesting, and covering so many different areas, history, science. It's kind of neat. So
Awesome. Good.
okay. And thanks everybody for coming. Have a great day.